Commander Jake Morrison was deep asleep when the emergency alarm screamed through the UES Defiance. Red lights flashed in his quarters as he rolled out of bed, already reaching for his uniform. 3 in the morning was never good news in space. "Bridge, what's the situation?" Jake spoke into his comm as he pulled on his boots. His years of military service had taught him to wake up fast and think even faster. "Priority transmission from the Galactic Council, sir. Ambassador Veltar is requesting immediate contact." Jake frowned. The Council calling humans directly was unusual. They preferred to keep Earth's people at a distance, treating them like dangerous animals that might bite. For 30 years, humanity had been labeled as aggressive Deathworlders, creatures from a planet so harsh that anyone who survived it was considered a threat. The bridge was buzzing with activity when Jake arrived. His crew moved with practiced efficiency, their faces showing the same confusion he felt. Lieutenant Rebecca Chen, his second-in-command, was already at the communications console. "Sir, the ambassador looks different. Scared, maybe?" Rebecca kept her voice low. She'd dealt with council politics before and knew how rare it was to see them show emotion. The holographic projector flickered to life, showing Ambassador Veltar in his ornate council chambers. The tall, pale alien usually carried himself with the dignity of someone who ruled half the galaxy. Today, his 4 arms shook as he leaned forward, his large black eyes wide with something Jake had never seen before, panic. "Commander Morrison," the translator device made Veltar's clicking sounds into perfect English. "We require immediate human intervention. The situation is beyond our capabilities." Jake crossed his arms and studied the alien's face. "Ambassador, with respect, your people have spent decades telling us to stay in our corner of space. What's changed?" Veltar's head tentacles twitched nervously. "The Zephyrian colony on Kepler 442b. 40,000 peaceful beings lived there just 1 week ago. They were farmers, teachers, artists, completely harmless." His voice broke through the translator. "Something is consuming them." Rebecca stepped closer to the projection. "Consuming how? Pirates? Slavers? No. Something worse. We call them the Devourers. They appeared from deep space 5 days ago. Our long-range sensors show massive organic structures covering the planet now. The structures are alive." The bridge fell silent. Jake had seen plenty of horrors in his 20 years fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy, but the way Veltar described these creatures sent chills down his spine. "We sent our finest military units," Veltar continued. "The Iron Fleet of Centauri. The War Singers of Proxima. Elite forces that have never known defeat." He paused, his breathing heavy. "They were eliminated within 6 hours. Completely destroyed." Jake's tactical mind was already working. If the Council's best couldn't handle this threat, it had to be something extraordinary. "How many survivors?" 12,000 Zephyrian civilians are trapped in mountain caves. Our scanners show the Devourers haven't reached them yet, but... Veltar's image flickered as his hands shook. "We estimate 72 hours before total extinction." The weight of 12,000 lives settled on Jake's shoulders. He looked around the bridge at his crew, 28 humans from a dozen different Earth nations, all watching him for an answer. "Tell me about these Devourers," Jake said. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Veltar's translator crackled as he spoke faster. "A parasitic hive mind. They consume sentient life and convert the biomass into more of themselves. Every person they kill makes them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. In 5 days, they've grown from a small scout force into something that covers continents." Rebecca was already pulling up star charts. "Kepler 442b is in Council space. Why come to us? Why not handle it internally?" "Because," Veltar's voice dropped to almost a whisper, "they've never encountered resistance like this before. Our people panic and flee. Our soldiers break ranks when faced with creatures that feel no pain, show no mercy, and adapt to every strategy we employ. He looked directly at Jake. We need predators, Commander. We need killers who won't run when things get impossible. Jake almost smiled at that. Humans had been called killers, predators, and worse by the Council for years. Now those same traits were exactly what they needed. Sir, Rebecca spoke quietly, the Council has never asked for our help before. This could be a trap. Jake studied Veltar's desperate expression. Fear was hard to fake, especially for a species that barely understood the emotion. Ambassador, what guarantee do we have that this isn't some Council plot? Commander, if this were a deception, would I humiliate myself by begging the species we've scorned for decades? Veltar's pride was clearly wounded. Would I admit that our greatest military minds have failed where we hope yours might succeed? The bridge was quiet except for the hum of life support systems. Jake felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. 12,000 innocent lives hung in the balance, and if the Devourers were as dangerous as described, they might not stop with one planet. He turned to his crew. Rebecca, how long to reach Kepler 442b at maximum burn? 18 hours, sir. Jake nodded, then looked back at the hologram. Ambassador, my people have a saying, we don't negotiate with monsters. If these Devourers want a fight, we'll give them one they won't forget. For the first time in the conversation, something like hope appeared in Veltar's alien features. Pack your gear, people, Jake called to his crew, his voice carrying the confidence that had kept them alive through a dozen impossible missions. We're going hunting. The shuttle Ranger shook violently as it punched through Kepler 442b's thick, poisonous atmosphere. Jake gripped his harness and watched the planet grow larger through the reinforced windows. What he saw made his stomach turn. 5 days ago, this had been one of the galaxy's most beautiful worlds. The Council had shown him pictures during the briefing, rolling green hills, crystal-clear rivers, and cities that looked like they were grown from living trees. The Zephyrians were peaceful farmers and artists who had never hurt anyone. Now the planet looked like a nightmare. Dark, twisted structures covered the landscape like giant tumors. They pulsed with a sick, red light that made Jake think of infected blood vessels. The organic towers stretched up into the clouds, some of them so tall they disappeared into the murky atmosphere. Dear God, Corporal Mike Davis pressed his face against the window, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander, those things are massive. My scanner says they're over 3 kilometers high. Sergeant Lisa Thompson was already setting up her equipment, checking her rifle scope and thermal imaging gear. She'd been Jake's sniper for 8 years, and he'd never seen anything shake her. Today was different. Even Lisa looked disturbed by what they were seeing. The whole planet's covered with these things, Lisa said, adjusting her scanner. Population centers are completely gone. But wait. She highlighted several heat signatures on her display. I'm picking up life signs in the mountain caves to the north. Looks like maybe 2,000 people, grouped in small clusters. Jake studied the tactical display, his mind working through possibilities. The Council forces had retreated in complete panic, their commanders unable to think clearly when faced with such horror. But Jake saw something different. He saw patterns. Look at how they move, he pointed to the display showing Devourer activity. See those gaps between the structures? They're moving like a hive mind, but they're sloppy. Overconfident. Dr. Tom Bradley looked up from his biological scanner. The young scientist had volunteered for this mission despite having a wife and baby daughter back on Earth. His readings showed complex organic networks connecting all the twisted towers. Commander, these structures aren't just buildings. They're alive. The neural network runs through those spires like a nervous system. If we could cut the connections. Tom traced the patterns on his screen. The whole system would stutter, Jake finished. Like cutting phone lines during a battle. They'd lose coordination. He turned to Rebecca. How long since your last urban warfare training? Rebecca Chin checked her assault rifle and grinned. After 15 years of fighting alongside Jake, she knew that look in his eyes. Too long, sir. But these aren't exactly urban environments we're dealing with. No, Jake agreed, they're target ranges. In the corner of the shuttle, their council observer was trembling. Quex was a young Veltari diplomat who had volunteered to witness the human response. The poor alien looked like he was about to be sick. Commander Morrison, Quex's translator, made his clicking sounds into nervous English. Surely you cannot be considering a direct assault on those structures. It would be suicide. Even your species cannot survive that. Jake finished checking his weapon and looked at the terrified alien. The kid was probably right by council standards. Any sane military force would take one look at this hellscape and call for evacuation ships. But humans weren't sane by galactic standards. That's what made them dangerous. Kid, Jake said with a cold smile, you just described Tuesday for a human marine. The shuttle touched down in a clearing about 10 kilometers from the nearest Devourer structure. As the ramp lowered, the smell hit them immediately. It was like rotting meat mixed with burning chemicals, so thick you could taste it. Mike stepped out first, his heavy weapons gear making him look like a walking tank. Air's toxic, but breathable. These masks should keep us alive for about 6 hours. Lisa was already setting up her sniper position, using the shuttle's hull for cover. Movement in the structures. Lots of it. They know we're here. Dr. Bradley took readings with his scanner while Rebecca organized their equipment. Jake stood at the edge of the clearing, studying the alien landscape through his binoculars. The Devourers had turned a paradise into hell in just 5 days. The ground was covered in some kind of organic slime that pulsed like a heartbeat. Dead trees had been twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches reaching toward the towers like grasping fingers. Sir, Rebecca joined him at the clearing's edge. The survivors are about 20 kilometers north, but there's no clear path. We'll have to go through Devourer territory. Jake nodded. 28 humans against an entire planet of monsters that had destroyed the Council's best military forces. The odds were impossible, the mission was suicidal, and success seemed like a fantasy. But 12,000 innocent people were counting on them. Families hiding in caves, parents holding their children, all waiting for someone brave enough to walk into hell and bring them home. Listen up, people, Jake called to his team. We're not here to win a war. We're here to save lives. The Council's people ran because they fought like the Council, by the book, predictable, safe. He looked at each of his Marines. We're going to fight like humans. Dirty, mean, and too stubborn to know when we're beaten. Mike laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the toxic air. Just like home, then. Exactly like home, Jake agreed. Now let's go show these monsters what happens when they mess with our neighbors. As they moved out toward the Devourer structures, Quex watched from the shuttle's window, certain he was witnessing the last moments of 28 brave but foolish humans. He had no idea he was actually watching the beginning of the end for the Devourers. The sun rose blood-red through Kepler 442b's poisoned atmosphere, casting twisted shadows across the alien landscape. Jake had split his team into 3 groups during the night. 12 humans were now moving through Devourer territory like deadly phantoms, while the rest maintained overwatch positions. Up in orbit, the Council fleet watched their scanners in stunned silence. Ambassador Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his best military advisors. None of them could believe what they were seeing. The humans are advancing, reported his tactical officer, voice filled with disbelief. They're not retreating. They're actually moving deeper into Devourer territory. Veltar's 4 arms trembled as he watched the display. Impossible. Our best warriors fled in terror when faced with those creatures. How are they maintaining formation? Down on the planet's surface, Mike Davis was doing something that would have killed any other species in the galaxy. He was crawling on his belly through a pool of acidic sludge, the kind that could dissolve steel in minutes. His chemical protection suit had torn on jagged debris an hour ago, exposing his skin to the burning liquid. But Mike kept moving. His bones, made dense and strong by growing up on Earth's heavy gravity, didn't break under the stress. His immune system, toughened by surviving countless Earth diseases, adapted to the alien toxins. What should have been a death sentence was just another uncomfortable day at the office. Almost there, Mike whispered into his comm, dragging a pack of explosives toward the base of a massive organic tower. The structure pulsed with veins of red light, like a giant heart pumping poison through the planet's body. 3 kilometers away, Lisa Thompson was doing something equally impossible. She had climbed one of the smaller Devourer spires, using her bare hands to grip surfaces that crackled with bioelectric energy. The voltage running through the tower was enough to fry most alien nervous systems instantly. Lisa just gritted her teeth and kept climbing. The electricity made her muscles twitch and her hair stand on end, but humans had been surviving lightning strikes for thousands of years. This was just a bigger version of the same thing. Target acquired, she whispered into her comm, settling into position with her sniper rifle. From up here, she could see the entire Devourer complex spread out below her like a map of hell. The Devourers themselves had never experienced anything like this. For millions of years, they had swept across worlds, consuming civilizations that either fled in panic or died in futile, predictable attacks. Their hive mind was programmed to handle prey, not predators. When Mike's first explosive charge detonated at the base of the primary hive node, the entire network shuddered. The collective consciousness that controlled billions of creatures suddenly felt something it had never experienced before: confusion. These new creatures weren't running away. They were advancing. They were hunting. Jake's voice crackled through the comm system as he coordinated the assault from his position. First node down. Lisa, you have eyes on the secondary target? Confirmed. Devourer forces are regrouping, but they're moving wrong. Like they don't understand what's happening. While the demolition and sniper teams caused chaos in the main complex, Rebecca Chen was leading the rescue operation in the mountain caves 20 kilometers away. She moved through the darkness with night vision equipment, following the heat signatures Lisa had detected earlier. The first group of survivors she found was a family of Zephyrians huddled behind a makeshift barricade of rocks. The aliens were tall and thin, with large eyes that reflected light like mirrors. When Rebecca's flashlight found them, they pressed themselves against the cave wall in terror. Easy there, Rebecca said softly, removing her helmet so they could see her face. We're human military. We're here to get you out of here. The adult Zephyrian made clicking sounds that Rebecca's translator converted to speech. You are the Deathworld species. The predators from Terra. A small Zephyrian child peeked out from behind its parent, staring at Rebecca with eyes that showed more fear of her than of the monsters outside. Rebecca's heart broke a little. These people were so gentle, so peaceful, that even their rescuers terrified them. I know we seem scary, Rebecca said, kneeling down to the child's level. But scary is what you need right now. We're going to take you home, I promise. Meanwhile, Dr. Tom Bradley was conducting psychological warfare that would have impressed the most creative human generals. He had spent hours analyzing the Devourer's communication frequency, learning how their hive mind transmitted information across the network. Instead of jamming their communications like any sensible military force would do, Tom did something uniquely human. He hijacked their frequency and flooded it with pure human aggression. The sound of Earth's apex predators filled the Devourer network. Roaring lions, howling wolves, screaming eagles. Mixed in were human war cries from a dozen different cultures, heavy metal music that made the ground shake, and the recorded sounds of human soldiers charging into battle. The hive mind had never experienced fear before. It was a predator species that had consumed countless worlds without ever meeting real resistance. But now, for the first time in millions of years, it felt something that made its collective consciousness recoil in horror. These humans weren't just fighting back. They were enjoying it. Up in orbit, Veltar watched his scanners show something impossible. The Devourer forces are retreating. Confirmed, sir. They're pulling back from multiple positions. The humans have disrupted their coordination somehow. On the planet below, Jake smiled grimly as he watched Devourer creatures stumble and fall, their hive mind struggling to process the chaos his team had unleashed. Phase 1 complete. All teams, begin Phase 2. Time to show these things what happens when they pick a fight with Earth. The Devourers had made a fatal mistake. They had threatened innocent people within range of human marines. Now they were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy called Earth a death world. It wasn't because humans were hard to kill, though they were. It wasn't because they came from a dangerous planet, though they did. It was because when humans decided to protect something, they became the most dangerous force in the known universe. And 12,000 innocent lives were definitely worth protecting. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when the humans showed the galaxy exactly why Earth was marked with a skull symbol on every star chart. The planet classification, Class 12 Death World, wasn't just a warning about dangerous animals or harsh weather. It was a warning about the kind of creatures that could survive there. Jake Morrison was fighting with his left arm hanging useless at his side. A Devourer warrior had caught him with a bone spike 2 hours ago, dislocating his shoulder and tearing muscle. Any Council soldier would have been evacuated immediately. Jake just popped the joint back into place against a rock wall and kept fighting. "Commander, you need medical attention," Dr. Tom Bradley called out during a brief lull in the combat. "After the civilians are safe," Jake replied, switching his rifle to his good arm. "How many more to evacuate?" 800 still in the caves, sir." Jake nodded and continued advancing toward the next Devourer position. Pain was just information, and right now he had more important things to focus on. Mike Davis was in even worse shape. The demolitions expert was working his way through a chemical plant that the Devourers had turned into a toxic nightmare. His protective gear had failed completely, and his exposed skin showed angry red burns from the alien acids. The scanner readings showed he was breathing poison that should have killed him an hour ago. But Mike kept placing charges. His body was shutting down slowly, but his Earth-trained immune system was buying him time that no other species would have. Every few minutes, he'd pause to vomit blood, then continue with his mission. "Mike, get out of there," Rebecca's voice crackled through his damaged comm system. "Almost done," Mike wheezed, his voice barely recognizable. "Just 2 more charges and this whole section goes down." Up on her sniper perch, Lisa Thompson was providing cover fire while standing in a cloud of toxic gas that would have melted the lungs of any other species. Her scanner showed lethal readings for radiation, chemical toxins, and biohazards. She ignored all of them. Lisa had grown up in the industrial wasteland of what used to be Detroit. Her childhood playground had been contaminated with chemicals that made this alien poison look like fresh air. Her body had adapted to toxins before she could walk. "Targets at 2 o'clock, she reported calmly, adjusting her rifle scope. "Taking the shot." From orbit, Quex was transmitting constant updates to the Council fleet, his voice shaking with disbelief. "This is impossible," the young diplomat reported. "According to our medical scanners, every human down there should be dead. Multiple times over. Commander Morrison is fighting with massive internal bleeding. Sergeant Thompson is breathing gas that registers as lethal. Corporal Davis." Quex paused, checking his readings. "Corporal Davis died according to our scanners 20 minutes ago, but he's still moving." Ambassador Veltar studied the tactical display, his 4 arms trembling. "What are we seeing?" "Evolution, sir. This is what happens when a species evolves on a planet that tries to kill them every single day for millions of years. Down on the planet, something had happened that the Devourer's hive mind couldn't understand. The humans had made this mission personal. It wasn't just about following orders or completing an objective anymore. Every Marine had looked into the eyes of terrified Zephyrian children and made a promise. Dr. Tom Bradley perfectly demonstrated this human trait. The young scientist was carrying a wounded Zephyrian child on his back, the alien's blue blood staining his uniform. At the same time, he was laying down suppressive fire with his assault rifle, coordinating medical evacuations through his comm system, and analyzing Devourer biosignatures to find weak points. "Papa, where are we going?" the injured child whispered in its clicking language. "Home," Tom replied through his translator, never missing a shot. "The scary humans are taking you home." Rebecca was doing 3 impossible things at once. She was organizing civilian convoys, moving hundreds of terrified aliens through a war zone. She was simultaneously coordinating orbital strikes from the Council fleet, calling down precise fire support. And she was fighting a running battle with Devourer forces, never letting them get close to her charges. "Council fleet, this is Chen. I need fire support at grid reference 447. Wait for my mark." "Negative, Lieutenant. Our targeting systems show friendly forces too close for safe bombardment." Rebecca smiled grimly as she shepherded another group of families toward the evacuation ships. "Trust me, we're tougher than we look. Fire on my mark." The orbital bombardment came down like the hammer of an angry god, vaporizing Devourer positions just meters from human forces. Any other species would have been killed by their own supporting fire. The humans just kept moving. The Devourer's hive mind was beginning to fracture. For millions of years, they had been the ultimate predators, consuming entire civilizations without ever meeting real resistance. They were programmed to handle prey animals that ran in panic or fought in predictable, desperate patterns. But humans weren't prey. They were apex predators from a world so dangerous that it had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. They fought harder when wounded. They became more dangerous when cornered. They would die before abandoning the innocent. The breaking point came when Jake's team reached the central neural spire, the massive tower that coordinated the entire Devourer network. Mike had used the last of his strength to plant charges at its base, while Lisa provided cover fire from an impossible position. "Package delivered," Mike reported, his voice weak but satisfied. The demolitions expert collapsed as soon as he finished speaking, his body finally giving out after hours of fighting through lethal conditions. But his thumb never left the detonator's deadman switch. When the central spire exploded, the sound that echoed across the planet wasn't just the destruction of alien architecture. It was the scream of a predator species that had suddenly realized it wasn't at the top of the food chain anymore. The remaining Devourer forces began fleeing toward their ships in complete panic. Their hive mind, broken and confused, broadcast the same message over and over on every frequency. "Avoid the Deathworld species. They are not prey. They are not prey. They are not prey." As the alien monsters fled into space, Jake stood in the ruins of their complex, his team battered but victorious. Around him, evacuation ships were lifting off with the last of the Zephyrian survivors. "All civilians evacuated, sir," Rebecca reported. "Mission accomplished." Jake looked at his wounded team and smiled. They had done something the Council's best forces couldn't do. They had faced the impossible and won, because that's what humans did. They turned nightmares into Tuesday afternoons. The last evacuation ship lifted off from Kepler 442b's scarred surface as the planet's red sun set through the toxic atmosphere. Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the medical bay aboard the UES Defiance, watching the wounded world shrink behind them. The numbers told the story in cold, brutal terms. Of the 40,000 Zephyrians who had called this planet home just 1 week ago, only 1,847 were still alive. The human rescue mission had saved every survivor they could find, but the cost of that salvation was written in blood and sacrifice. 4 of Jake's Marines would never see Earth again. Petty Officer Ryan Walsh had died holding a choke point while civilians evacuated. Corporal Janet Stone had been caught in a Devourer acid spray while carrying wounded aliens to safety. Private First Class Danny Kim had sacrificed himself to detonate charges when his remote detonator failed. Sergeant Carlos Mendez had held off an entire devourer swarm with nothing but a combat knife and pure human stubbornness. 6 more were fighting for their lives in the ship's medical bay. Mike Davis lay unconscious in a biobed, his body covered in chemical burns that would leave him scarred for the rest of his life. The doctors said he would live, but he'd need months of reconstructive surgery and would never look the same. Lisa Thompson sat quietly in another bed, her sniper's hand steady despite the nerve damage from electric shock. Half her hair had been burned off, and her left eye was covered with bandages, but she insisted on cleaning her rifle while the medics worked on her. "Ma'am," a young medic approached Lisa nervously. "You really should rest. The electrical damage to your nervous system." "Kid," Lisa replied without looking up from her weapon, "I've been electrocuted by worse things than alien towers. Just patch me up and let me do my job." Dr. Tom Bradley was in the bed next to Mike, his left arm in a regeneration tank after acid had eaten through flesh and bone. But he was awake and alert, monitoring the vital signs of the Zephyrian children they'd rescued. Even while recovering from his own injuries, he couldn't stop taking care of others. Jake had been standing at that window for 2 hours, watching his people heal and remembering his people who wouldn't. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did right now. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. Quex, the young council observer, had been quiet since the battle ended. The alien diplomat had watched humans do impossible things, and it had shaken everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. Commander Morrison, Quex's translator, made his nervous clicks into hesitant English. "The Galactic Council wishes to express, we had no idea your species was capable of such sacrifice." Jake didn't turn around. He kept watching Mike's chest rise and fall in the biobed, grateful for every breath his demolitions expert managed to take. "We don't do it because we're expendable," Jake said quietly. "We don't do it because we're crazy or stupid or because we don't value life." He finally looked at Quex. "We do it because when everything else stops working, when all the smart plans fail and all the safe options are gone, somebody has to step forward. That's what humans do." Rebecca appeared beside him, half her face wrapped in healing bandages from acid exposure. Despite her injuries, she was smiling. The kind of smile that said they'd done something worth the cost. "The Zephyrians have been asking about us," Rebecca said. "They want to know what to call the species that saved them. Their translators are having trouble with human military, so they've come up with their own term. Which is Guardians from the Death World." Rebecca's smile widened. "Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Jake almost laughed. Leave it to the most peaceful species in the galaxy to come up with the most badass name for humans he'd ever heard. Over the next week, something unprecedented happened in galactic politics. The Council's emergency response protocols, unchanged for over 1,000 years, were quietly updated. Diplomatic channels were still the first option when crises arose. Military intervention by Council forces remained the second choice. But now there was a third option, written in small print at the bottom of official documents: in cases of extreme threat where conventional responses prove inadequate, consider deployment of human assets. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Sometimes, to save innocent lives, you needed to unleash something that scared even the monsters. Jake's final mission report was the shortest in military history: objective accomplished. Casualties acceptable. Recommend hazard pay increases for Deathworld operations. But the real measure of their success wasn't in official reports. It was in the children's laughter echoing through refugee ships. It was in the grateful tears of Zephyrian families reunited with loved ones. It was in the knowledge that when faced with impossible odds and certain death, 28 humans had chosen to stand and fight. Meanwhile, in the cold depths of space, the surviving Devourer ships transmitted warning signals to every member of their species across the galaxy. The message was simple and repeated endlessly. Alert, avoid the third planet orbiting the yellow star. The species there are not prey. They are guardians. They do not flee. They do not break. They will follow you into the dark and make you pay for every innocent life you take. Do not engage. Do not approach. Do not provoke. The message spread through devourer networks for months, carrying with it a new understanding. For millions of years, they had been the ultimate predators, the things that other species feared in the dark. But now they knew fear themselves. Humanity had earned its place in the galactic community not through conquest or intimidation, but through sacrifice. They were the species others called when hope was lost and heroes were needed. They were the ones who would walk into hell itself if innocent lives were on the line. The Zephyrians built a memorial on their new homeworld. It showed 28 human figures standing against impossible odds, with an inscription in a dozen languages, to the guardians from the Deathworld, who taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. Jake kept a photo of that memorial on his desk for the rest of his career. Every time someone called humans dangerous, every time the Council worried about Earth's aggressive tendencies, he would look at that picture and remember. They weren't dangerous because they liked to fight. They were dangerous because they refused to let evil win. And sometimes, that made all the difference in the galaxy.